Dash module number 2 then. Let's take a quick look at the physical construction of the unit. As per most of the Knights of England dash modules, we have an overlay panel, a two-sided circuit board and a plexiglass rear panel, bringing the connections to the unit out via a single connector. This one actually uses a 25-way connector, the largest connector of any of the dash modules, because of the amount of functionality on this module. You can see that we've implemented the electronics using surface mount components wherever possible, so that we can get everything onto a single board. We have calibration pots on the back for a number of functions. The speedo is calibrated by this pot here, the temperature gauge and the fuel gauge all can be calibrated without having to remove the back panel. So, detail of the unit, how it works and what it does, can be found on the website, and we're now going to have a short demonstration of what the actual unit looks like in operation. So, there you go. Okay, here's dash module number 2. Let's have a look at the displays in operation. The most prominent display on DM2 is the speedometer display. Let's just switch power onto the unit, which is powered by ignition power. So we switch on ignition power and the display illuminates. We can see the most prominent display on this unit is the speedometer. Now the speedometer includes a numeric section and a bar gauge section along the top. If we give it a signal, a speedo signal, we can see that the numeric section illuminates and the bar gauge is configured to give one additional LED for every 10 miles per hour. So at 41 miles per hour, which we're seeing at the moment, we can see 4 LEDs illuminated. This particular test rig is set up so it's only getting to 40 miles per hour, but the display itself will obviously read to 140 miles per hour, not that we recommend you do those kind of speeds. We also have a switch which enables you to increase the sensitivity of the bar gauge section of the display, just so that it's more colourful. So if I switch that to high sensitivity mode, we can see that we have 8 LEDs illuminated for the same speed. You can read more about that on the website. Let's have a look at the other displays on here. Immediately below the bar gauge we have 3 rectangular indicators in a line. Now we use those as telltale repeaters for the main beam light, that's the centre one here, and the left and right turn signals. And right turn, so that's what we use those for. You'll also see immediately below a 4-digit display. That's just a dummy display right now. We may use it for something later, but on the currently available DM2s that's just a dummy display, as in fact is this 9-digit display at the bottom. Interestingly, there's a 9-digit odometer which fits nicely into this unit, available from Brennan Fulbright at Electric Enterprises. You might want to have a look into incorporating that into our module. So you could purchase that particular unit from Brennan and incorporate it into our DM2. These bar gauges here, which on the show you'll remember are labelled signal and tuning, we've got them configured as an engine temperature gauge and a fuel gauge. So engine temperature, just bear with me a second while I find the right control on my test rig. There we go, engine temperature. a nice bar gauge indication, and fuel gauge. Nice to see we have a full tank of fuel now, but as you know, if you own one of these cars, it goes down all too quickly. So that's what those gauges are all about. What else do we have on DM2? Well, we have a number of red and green indicator pairs which we've configured. You can actually use these to indicate any high switched function on the car. Each one of these, when its associated input is at 12 volts, will be green, and when the associated input is open circuit, it will be red. Now we've configured these first four to represent, I'm not going to describe this in too much detail here, it's going to be complicated, but you can have a look on the website. Basically these first four are used to indicate, used to diagnose rather, potential problems with the fuel system. The last one, this one here, is used to indicate that the fuel pump relay is intact. So if it were to blow, it would go from green to red. The one immediately to the left of that indicates that there is an output from the fuel pump relay. So obviously if the fuel pump relay blew, not only would its output go to open circuit, but also there'd be no output from the fuel pump fuse. Further back than that, we can test whether there is an actual drive to the fuel pump relay from the ECM. And even further back from that, we can test if there's actual power to the ECM itself. So if ECM power goes, we lose all four of those. If ECM power is good, but it's not driving the fuel pump relay, we lose those three. If the ECM power is good and it's driving the fuel pump relay, but there's no output from the fuel pump relay, we lose those two. If the ECM power is good and it's driving the fuel pump relay and there's an output from the fuel pump relay, but the fuel pump fuse is blown, we just lose that one. So if they're all green, everything's good. If any of them go to red, we can diagnose the point of the failure by looking at those. It's quite useful. The next one along is labelled on this particular version of DM2 as fasten belts, but we're not going to really use it for that. I think it's more useful to use it as something else like reverse lights, backup lights. So either way, it's a high switched input, the same. Secondary ignition power is quite a useful function to monitor. That's usually used to drive the window motors and also the voice modulator box DM3 on our dash. So it's useful to know if secondary ignition power is available. And finally we have a crank signal. When the engine is being cranked, the final one of these indicators will come in, and in actual fact the ignition switch is configured so that when you start cranking the engine, secondary ignition power is temporarily cut out, and we can see that we've represented that configuration on the test rig so that as we switch cranking in, secondary ignition power drops out until we stop cranking and secondary ignition power comes back in again. So that all sounded a little bit confused, and as I say, you can read more about it on the website. It just gives you an idea of what the displays look like and what they do. This particular module, DM2, contains probably more functionality than any of the other 5 dash modules on the unit, on the car. And the only things that we don't have functionality for are these two numeric displays, the 4-digit one and the 9-digit one. But we can configure those to whatever number you want. In actual fact, you might be wondering what this number is here, 184365572. It's the firing order of a small block Chevy engine actually, so it's a useful number if not many people appreciate what it means. There you go, dash module number 2. Thank you.